Om Satyena Labhyastapasa Yesa Atma Samyagyanena Brahmacharyena Nityam Antaha Sarirehi Jyotirmayo Hi Shubhraha Yam Pashanti Yatayaha Kshinadoshaha Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. The Atman, the indivisible self in all beings and all things, is realized by knowledge, moderation, austerity, and veracity. All of these constantly cultivated. When mental impurities dissolve due to this practice, then the seer beholds it everywhere, existing in everything. Even here in this very life, mind and body. Om, peace, peace, peace. And there shines Brahman. May that Brahman protect us. May that Brahman sustain us. May that Brahman illumine, inspire, and compel our thinking process. May we not find fault with each other, with the teachings, with the world. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om, peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat. Coming together here on Sunday, as usual, for the final class of this series on the 7 upper stages of knowledge, which were preceded by the 7 lower stages of knowledge. That you might call that the good and the bad news today. But we saw that the lower stages of knowledge that were accompanied by Ajnana, because we know, as Gaudapada says, the wise encourage the Jnana Yoga in his Karika, he says. So we know that Ajnana would be the opposite of that special knowledge, which is given to those beings who can transcend dualities. Dualities like cause and effect, which is a very high and difficult one to manage, because people are living under the constraints of cause and effect all the time. And it causes them to apprehend the world as being real when it's neither real nor unreal, as the non-dualists say. And that will be explained deeper later this month at our retreat up the Columbia River Gorge on the Mahamudra teachings and Gaudapada's Karika. But the main point here is that special knowledge or special discernment that's given to living beings, which would allow them to see beyond appearances, appearances like phenomena, appearances like illusions, like a man seeing a drunken elephant. I read that in the Karika the other day. I'm sorry, a drunken man seeing an elephant. I got that. I guess maybe the elephant would be drunken too in that case. So illusions, appearances, phenomena, those are the things that convince people that this world of objects is real. And that kind of ajnana accompanies the lower stages of knowledge. The sapta, it means 7 Ajnana Bhumikas. And we climbed up through those in our excursion, in our observation or our scrutiny of how a person who's living bereft of that kind of special discernment comes into his or her own and begins to see things as they truly are. That is, basically all this is Brahman. And thou art that too. So usually in a reverse order, though, beings would realize their oneness with divine reality, and then with the force of that realization accompanying them all the way down to their senses and the objects which the senses behold. And then they would also begin to see a strange difference in everything that they see, touch, hear, taste, and smell, the five senses. And made of the five elements, they're beginning to see these in a much different light now, the light of Brahman, in other words. And that's when they climb up to these higher bhumikas that we've been looking at, of which we accomplished 4 of them over the last 2 weeks when we made that grade and pierced through that granthi, or that knot between the two. They were at the time bearing titles like waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, if you remember. Jagrat is waking, and Swapna is dreaming, Sushupti is deep sleep. So all of the 7 lower levels of knowledge, vibrations of the mind, were grosser, denser, heavier, and were therefore given the names of these 3 states of awareness that are common to everyone who's in the body: waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. But it's only the seers, and particularly of India, that have looked deeply into those as being states of awareness, rather than just my day and my night that I experienced, or my ego going away in deep sleep, and I never questioned the fact of what happened to me there in that few hours that I went into deep sleep at night. So they begin to themselves, with intense scrut, as I've heard it say, great scrutiny, they begin to look at these states of awareness and how they behaved under certain conditions, that is, under the conditions of spiritual practice, sadhana. And that self-effort is very much needed. So the procedures of the mind are very much needed, says Gaudapada in his Karaka, in order to overcome the mind and turn it into non-dual mind. It's actually a little bit of a turn of phrase there, is that the mind is always non-dual, according to him. And it just becomes dual by looking out and encountering objects and considering them to be real, instead of seeing them as projections of the mind or as phenomena that are coming and going all the time, like in deep sleep. So those lower Jnana Bhumikas were associated directly in name with waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. You see the Bindu Jagrat, Maha Jagrat, Swapna, Swapna Jagrat, and Sushupti are all names of differing levels of waking, dreaming, and deep sleep experience. And they're all, of course, in a darkened state. That means the elements aren't being really seen for the Mahapanchabhutas that they are, the great 5 elements. The senses aren't really being utilized as the vehicles and instruments for beholding divine awareness in everything, seeing Brahman in everything. That's not given to very many souls with the 5 senses. And of course, not given to animals and insects with lesser senses. So it wasn't until a week ago, or a week and a half ago, plus a half a class, that we bridged the Jnana Bhumikas, and they started having different names, didn't they? Names like Vicharana, that you would become an observer of the changes that are going on in your mind once you had begun to rid yourself of that false knowledge or false appearances that you had taken for granted earlier, before your mind had been gifted this special discernment called Viveka in Vedanta and called Vijnana in Advaita. And the absence of chitta vrittis in yoga, where the thoughts get so refined that they start to disappear. And that's called samadhi. And if the awareness remains there when the thoughts disappear, it's called samadhi. If the awareness goes away when the thoughts disappear, it's just called dullness. a vacuum that my awareness wasn't with me. And you talk about the vacuum of all vacuums. Of course, that would be deep sleep. It's uh, uh, not only the seeds to everything are in deep sleep and held in abeyance, but the ignorance is also held in abeyance in your deep sleep state. So it's going to fall upon the practitioner to bring some sort of special light into those states. And when it does, then they begin to talk about Turiya, or the fourth state. And that is, of course, the name of the highest reach of Jnana Bhumika that we have to look at today. And we will get to these last three because we did look at the first four, as I was saying. And we left off with, and of course, this is Jai Ma, Mahadevi, because this is Mother's Day. And wonder of wonders, it's also Shankara's birthday. So we have on this special Sunday, the 12th, that we have a double birthday of two very powerful and wisdom-filled and essentially non-dual personalities or entities or divinities falling today auspiciously together. So this is a good day to be looking into these highest of all Jnana Bhumikas, which you see here on the chart that you're seeing again now, Sattvapati, Asamshakti, and Padartha Bhavana. We looked at Sattvapati all the way till the end, last Sunday, until we reached that place at the end of the Sattvapati teachings, which Lord Vasishtha is giving to his disciple. And we saw there that the soul in that state reaches mature detachment. So detachment from objects, number one, as seen as real or as actual, because they're projections of the mind when you look into them, because they change in dream and they go away in deep sleep. So they alter all the time. They change depending on the level of your awareness. So when you're getting higher awareness, this change is seen as very remarkable change that you take note of. And then you can begin to see everything as being a projection of the mind and not real, like waving a firebrand we were talking about yesterday at satsang. All the appearances that come out of the waving of the flame they're inherent in the firebrand. And when you stop waving it, they all go back into the firebrand. They didn't come from anywhere else but the firebrand. That's what's used as an analogy for the mind and phenomena, that when the mind is waved, that is when it thinks, when it vibrates. And it can vibrate dully, and it can vibrate higher too. You have to make sure to make that distinction. Then these appearances called worlds, lokas, and their objects come forth. And at that point, the non-dualist is supposed to say, that's an appearance, all that manifestation is appearance. So some people jump to the premature conclusion that because I've become non-dual, or because my understanding has reached non-duality, that the world is unreal, therefore I should give it up. But the idea is that, and even Gaudapada even says in his Karika, is that you just go about the world as if it's unreal. Because your problem before was going about the world thinking it was real, right? And that brought you attachment, the opposite of detachment, which we'll look at now. And it brought you sorrows, and it brought you loss, and it brought you suffering. And that's a big problem. Even Gaudapada says in his Karika, I'm quoting a lot from him because of the retreat in a couple of weeks. He also says that if you see suffering in the world, you should immediately take refuge in the unborn. He means in non-origination, unborn with a U. That's the truth of the matter, and it's the only thing existing here. Call it Brahman, if you will. And so if the world starts to give you problems and suffering, then your mind is on a wrong track. And it must immediately withdraw from that via modes of detachment and say, though that's an appearance that's being foisted upon me, and I'm buying into it. The appearances will try and convince you that the world is real. Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa said that. The more lifetimes they live, um, um, attached to objects, the more lifetimes, the more they'll consider the world to be real. So you've got billions of souls in this particular world who have been living lifetimes thinking that the world is real. And they also think that their birth into it is real, and they think their death going out of it is real. They think that the ancestor realm that they go to is real. That's a dream, by the way. That's waking and dreaming you're talking about. And then when the souls come back again and take up another body, they begin to think right away that this is real. My body's real, my birth is real. And the non-dualists like Gaudapada just cut this out completely. In fact, that's a good thing. Cut it out. And come up to you and say, what are you doing thinking like that? Cut it out. There's an expression we used to, don't think like that anymore. The world's not real, give it up. And then go about the world like an insensate thing. That's right out of the Karka. His student Shankara used it later in the Vivekachudamani, but that was Gaudapada's coinage of a phrase, turn of a phrase. So you're just acting wrong if you're not in this higher stage of wisdom, which makes you see without a doubt that this is all an appearance, that this is all a dream, swapna. And you came out of the dream of the dream. Now you have to get out of the idea of the waking state being a dream. You have to understand that, as Ramana Maharshi said, there's dream number one and dream number two. If you study these Jnana Bhumikas and look into Gaudapada's Karka, then you'll understand centuries later what Ramana Maharshi said when he said, it's dream number one and dream number two here, and you're to awaken from both of them. So the awakening is a state of higher mind that you come to. That's the awakening. It's not like you grow two horns, as Holy Mother said, or you start walking on water, or you can levitate, or nonsense like that. It's that your mind reaches this high pinnacle of awareness where it sees through all appearances and knows for a certain, once and for all, that this has been a projection of the mind and that everything is unborn, even the projection. So that would go doubly for objects and for even more so for illusions or false projections, misconceptions, ignorance, but it also pertains to entities. That is, basically these things which people are attached to, tattvas and also worlds, senses, elements, and so forth. The only thing it doesn't pertain to is the jivas, because they're doing the dreaming. So if they can wake up out of the dream, then the jivatman will become the paramatman. And this is what I'm trying to give you a little bit of a precursor or preparation for encountering these upper three Jnana Bhumikas. What the mind of this more qualified soul is actually encountering now inside of him or herself, the self. So we did look at Sattva last week at the end of the class. We ended up here on the last teaching that Vasishtha gave, reaches mature detachment. So that's why I wanted to run you through really quick levels of detachment. And that will give us a very good idea of what's going on here in the level of what they call vairagya in Vedanta. It's a kind of special discernment. Viveka Gyan, if you want to call it that. It's a special discrimination by which you see with a higher wisdom all of this name and form manifesting through time and space due to cause and effect, and how you can then rise above it all, including cause and effect, which is a very difficult proposition. So you see here, if you refer to Upanisads, how much they corroborate these teachings of the Jnana Bhumikas. The Teja Bindu is like that eye of light, right? Of pure spiritual light, like that's there at the Agya Chakra. It says, sages reach the inaccessible, making it accessible via the three gates of vairagya, utsaha, and guru bhakti. Serving the guru and the spiritual cause with great enthusiasm, they learned the meaning of dispassion and attained supreme detachment. That's the highest detachment. Would be tivya vairagya. So we're talking about it, padartha bhavana and turiya. So what was that again? With detachment from things unreal that they've come to know are being originated, because non-origination is the ultimate truth. That is, Advaita is the truth, but duality has to do all with creation. So beyond creation is this non-dual truth called Advaita. So by coming to know that through stages of detachment, then you get enthusiastic, utsaha. You get enthusiastic for seeing God face to face, for merging with God, and for having the bliss of Brahman. And this is a special, not only a special detachment, it also turns into a special kind of enthusiasm that I want to be free in this very lifetime. I want to attain Jivan Mukta, Jivan Mukti state. And so therefore, I'll go to a specialist, and that's where Guru Bhakti comes in. So these three things are put forth in the Upanishad itself uh, to give us a great instance of how these souls um, climb the ladder of the Jnana Bhumikas themselves. And as they do, you might find a little miniature ladder inside of that climb called these levels of detachment, these 12 levels of detachment. So first of all, go through them quickly. Yatmana, initial detachment of a beginning aspirant who, having come to know the body and senses, that they require purification, attempts to bring them under control. That's even said again by Gaudapada in his Karika. It says, make sure that you purify the mind. When it wants to lose itself in desires, calm it down. And then once it's calmed down, don't disturb it ever again. It's a straight quote out of the Karika. So you're working with the mind, as Holy Mother said. The mind is everything for you at this stage. So it cannot be waving all the time in the air, throwing off appearances that you buy into and suffer because of they're not real. So cease the firebrand from moving, stop the mind from thinking in the old ways, and get this enthusiasm to think in a new way with truth as your ground instead of falsehood or mixed truth and non-truth. So we're talking about an initial or beginning kind of detachment that's very advanced for most people already. That is, most people don't want to control, don't want to bring the senses back from the objects. And most people don't know that the senses are actually rooted in the mind. And so it's going to be a kind of a triple step there that's taken in one step to all of a sudden have this enthusiasm to see the real and go beyond the unreal. Usually it happens when people suffer. You see, that's what the seers have noticed. When they start to suffer, then they might make a turn. And actually, these lower, there's an example they use for these lower detachments, like Yatamana and Mridu Vairagya. Basically, is that the man loses his wife and he feels like quitting and giving up the world. A couple of weeks later, he's getting remarried. The sages have used this as an example. So, that detachment that he felt by a horrible experience in Maya, in relativity, lasted only for a matter of a few minutes or moments. And then all of a sudden he was back to his old self again, desiring to have things that were unreal that caused him suffering earlier. Did not learn his lesson at all. So that's an example of beginning detachment. That's initial detachment, means it's the first sign of it that comes to people. Next is Mrida Vairagya or Mridu Vairagya, mild detachment, which is intermittent, vague, and weak, which easily falls victim to compromise and distraction. So Sri Ramakrishna told the story. Man, young man, decided he wanted to renounce the world. He was in a fit of mridu vairagya. So he told his family, I'm going to Varanasi, Benares, and I'm going to renounce the world there. I'll send you some notice home, maybe, or goodbye forever. So he got there to Benares and he immediately found a job. Somebody offered him a real good job. So he took it, wrote back to his family and said, oh, I've got a great job here. I'm earning so many rupees a week. And I just went out and bought a bunch of things for myself. So they're thinking at home, but I thought he was going to renounce the world. So that's a good example Sri Ramakrishna uses of monkey vairagya. In fact, I found the Bengali and the Sanskrit for monkey detachment. I can't remember it at this moment, but it's this on again, off again, very meek and wild attachment that's even listed there in the scriptures. Madhya vairagya, basically, that's the third level of detachment. If you know Yataman is also used in early stages of yoga, so it's an early stage of practice. Mridu means middling, means mild, and madhyama means middling or middle level. So this is a kind of detachment that's beginning to become a little bit stronger. It's lacking in intensity, though, which nevertheless rises up sporadically at times with intensity, but soon dies away right away. So this would be the case more of a person maybe who went to Benares and kept his vow for a couple months and then decided, I can't keep this up. I think I'll quit now. So they had a little bit more stick to it power, but then decided that maybe this isn't for me after all. When they hit some hardships or encountered some difficulties, he said, it's just easier to give this up now. I mean, it can happen to people building a house. They build half a house and all of a sudden they don't want to build anymore. They don't want to finish it. So they don't follow through. So we're talking about spiritual detachment, but you can use these analogies in the world too. Moving through these quickly so we can get to the rest of what we need to cover here by the end of our time. Karna vairagya comes next. Karna really means cause. So it's a detachment caused by arising of various difficulties mixed with interrupted pleasures. So this is where pleasure and pain begin to become a kind of cause and effect, as I was mentioning earlier, that could really short circuit the process of moving the mind to a higher state of awareness. It's got to be more steady than that. Number 5 is uparama vairagya, detachment which arises from satiety of desires and disenchantment with works. It's a very precarious thing because you've actually come a long way and all of a sudden you don't have desires for the world anymore. So that can be a good thing, but can also be very dangerous for the soul. And it's not interested in continuing to act anymore in the world. So it's a good combination or formula for a non-renouncing sannyasin. I mean, for a renunciate, but nevertheless, it's got this very precarious level to it still, where there's a kind of apathy. You're renouncing out of a kind of apathy rather than this enthusiasm, which the Upanishad has been telling us. Then you have anashakti, the beginning of actual detachment, which represents the early stage of non-attachment. So that's really where it's like starting here at Subhecha in the Jnana Bhumikas is the same as if you were to start at Anashakti, then all of the difficulties and risks of the lower 4 levels of detachment would not be there when you started out. So if beings are qualified enough and advanced enough to start right there at this real non-attachment that isn't going to suffer the risks of these lower four, that's a very good sign for the progress of an advanced soul, advancing soul. And then you have Stula Vairagya, the fundamental or gross stage of authentic detachment, which is not yet fully matured. Stula means gross, basically, like this Stula Sharira is the body, gross body, as compared to your mind, which is a Sukshma Sharira, the subtle body. So you've got a gross body, a subtle body. So you use the same word in Sanskrit there to say that you had actual detachment going on, but now it's still at rather a rudimentary level, not fully matured yet. But that starts to change then at the 8th level of Vairagya, a more mature state of detachment, sometimes called the highest state of lower dispassion. So you can see how these great souls, these acharyas, these teachers, these gurus, and seers and sages who are working with humanity and so forth, have looked into this very deeply and seen how you can divide things into stages and then look at a stage that's of a medium type, like Madhu, divide that again into 3 times, like the end of a hair split 100 times, they say in the Upanishads. You're talking about something like the nadis. Used in the same way here, you see how each aspirant is at a certain level that is accompanied by certain barriers and also accompanied by certain positive traits in them. And so this is a good level to describe Vashikara. And then we go to the bottom of this right-hand column and look at Adimatra, number 9, the high state of detachment under the influence of which the pleasures of life seem insipid, even feel painful. So this is a place where, unlike earlier where you didn't have desires for things, that was desires for base and gross things. Now you don't have desire for things based on the fact that you have this enthusiasm for what you're beginning to see in this inner ascension that you're involved in. So now there's something to draw you on. So instead of before, there was just, oh, I'm kind of bored with this. I don't know if I can do this. My desires have left me a dull boy, And but here at this level, Adimatra, you could see that that it's more that something has come along to replace that, and it's combined with that is the idea of going back to pleasures now is off-putting. You see, before the pleasures were just not there, you couldn't get them back. Now, if they come to you, you're saying, I don't want those. It's a definite shift in maturity as far as detachment's going. Audasinya is a very lofty state of detachment brought about by jnanam, which causes indifference to sense experiences and transcendent of all contrasting pairs of opposites. Now you're beginning to talk about what's being described in Gaudapada's Karika, this very high level of detachment. And based in jnanam, the wise encourage you to the jnana yoga, says Gaudapada. That's going to take you to the highest level. Then you're getting to the 11th level, Tivya Vairagya. I mentioned it earlier. The most intense form of detachment, short of fully matured Vairagya, where a very keen sense of natural abidance is felt. This is beginning to echo some of these higher levels, Bhumikas too. We'll look at that. Finally, Paravairagya, of course, can't get no higher than that. That's true Vairagya, or detachment, fully matured. It says absolute and supreme detachment, which leaves the mind completely and permanently free of thoughts of worldly objects. And this is where we would say that the worldly objects are being seen as apparitions, projections of the mind. And so you can move amongst them, but you're no more under their influence. And you can enjoy them, but you're not attached to the enjoyment. You could experience them, you can own them, But you realize, you know in your mind of mind, your heart of hearts, that they're just a manifestation of the waving of the firebrand. They're just the mind's vibrations. And you've already trained yourself in the earlier stages and come out of the experience of them and had suffering with them to such an extent that you can now be perfectly in the body on earth with people, even in society and so forth, and not contain or court anymore the slightest bit of the idea that the world is to be, it will become your oyster, or it will fulfill you in any way. You've already arrived at the true fulfillment, which is yourself, which is inside of yourself. The last quote here to finish this chart: those who want to help mankind must take their own pleasures and pain, name and fame, and all sorts of interests, and make a bundle of them and throw them into the sea, and come to the Lord. Well, I didn't have room to put his name at the end of this quote, but it must be pretty obvious who we're listening to here. This beautiful image of the young Vivekananda. This is what all the masters said and did. The fact that the Lord is in us, we are he, the eternal subject, the real ego, never to be objectified, and that all this objectifying process is mere waste of time and talent. When the soul becomes aware of this, it gives up objectifying, detaches, and falls back more and more on the subjective, until we are ready to sacrifice everything else to one idea and to one alone. We never, never will see that light. If you want to give up everything for your own salvation, it is nothing. But do you want to forego even your own salvation for the good of the world? If so, then stem the tide of degeneration at the sacrifice of name, fame, wealth, and enjoyment, nay, of every hope for this or other worlds. Couldn't have been said better anywhere to summate these beautiful 10 levels of vairagya, or this intense dispassion, which is, of course, fully developed in the soul, like this great sannyasin. So I think that kind of puts an exclamation point on these these four, actually. And now let's get into 5, 6, and 7 and look at what we have that will elucidate or shine light upon them. After the beautiful Sattvapati state has come with all of these wonderful realizations and insights, asamshakti happens, merges in the Atman. Before, if you remember, at the lesser stages of knowledge, you could contemplate the Atman. So that was a really fine, deep step inside of you, that you actually know there is such a thing as a true soul, and that it's eternal, birthless, deathless, timeless, and that it's transcendent of things like senses and objects and the ego, personal ego, individuality. So you heard about it, you started to consider it. Because you started to consider it, you start to feel it intuitively. And when you started to feel it intuitively, then you started, if you want to put it that way, acquiring the rain cloud of virtues. They start to come out as if from nowhere inside your own being. And that's what's going to lead you to this, this state of, I'd say at this point, the ability to merge into yourself. And then, you know, the necessity of coming back out of yourself so you could merge again. It reminds us of Prabhupada's song where he says, you know, the black bees are always merging into Mother Kali's hair, and then they coming back out, and then they go back in again. Why don't they just stay in once they found that nectar of Mother Kali? It's because they like the feeling of separating from her and coming back together, taking the dive back into her nectar-like hair. So these black bees are souls, and they're losing the last vestige of their desire for individual existence, jivatman, and they began to realize their oneness with her, and now they've found where they can merge. So like that, at first you come to know of the existence of the Atman, then later on you take a dive into it and feel that deep intensity, which you had such enthusiasm for. And then you find that you can't hold your breath that long, like going underwater diving. You have to come up at some time. So you would separate from the Atman and look at it again in amazement, and then try another dive. And then as you begin to experience this repetitive communion and darshan with your own self, that's basically beginning to wear away all resistances that are still there. Subtle karmas, you hear about them in the practice of yoga, subtle mental impressions that are going away and dissolving with each dive. It's like there are some incrustations that are very subtle that are still on the transmigrating soul, that only this exposure to the divine light can dissolve. And they're starting to go away in this process. Merges in the Atman. And there, what I've been talking about since I first began speaking at this class was attains certitude of non-duality. That when that becomes the foundation upon which you live, your whole existence is based upon the truth of non-duality, then of course all that went before is seen as a dream and as a kind of game, and the game is over. It's fast becoming over for you. And you see it, like we looked at Vivekananda at a very young age, already through with all of that. It's like Jesus saying, "Get thee behind me," or "Birds have nests, foxes have holes," because I don't believe in objects and things anymore to be real. I'm a divine entity. I'm the Atman itself, clothed in 5 sheaths. But I've found out that the 5 sheaths are not actual. That only the Atman inside of them is the truth. These kinds of teachings, Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, Madhu, they call that the Madhu Upanishad. It's the most nectar you could possibly put together in any Upanishad. Speaks about the sheaths and the nectar. Is how they put it in that Upanishad. So it says, once you've read that, Gaudapada says, how can there be any more doubt that you're the Atman and there's these sheaths around you? Plain and simple. Now just learn to live in the sheaths by seeing them as what they are. And they're veils of grosser, subtler, and more causal level. Ego is the causal level of individuation. And then intelligence is extremely subtle. Then the mind can be subtle or gross. Then pretty soon the life force and then the body, of course, are the outermost levels of your assumed self, what you thought was yourself, what people still think is their self, their body, which is the first evolute of Maya. You are not the body. So living under this evolute of Maya for lifetimes and lifetimes, it's as likely that they're going to see Brahman as it is that you could empty the ocean with a blade of kusha grass. Gaudapada says, he's the one who came up with that analogy. It's as likely that they'll see their Atman by considering their bodies and everything to be the real, as it is likely that they could sit beside the ocean with a blade of kusha grass and empty it, see, drop by drop. So that's going to take some very powerful divine alchemy inside of a being. That's why we say, put together a combination of enthusiasm and wisdom and your guru's teachings and come to that realization that I am Atma Brahma. This self is nothing else than Brahman. There can be nothing else but it. It's the unborn, it's the unoriginated, And because it's unoriginated, everything else can be seen as unoriginated. That is, without origin. No birth, no death. Ajati is the word for that. All this time we've been thinking that things are being born and dying and living in cycles. That's just been a dream going on in a whirlpool in the mind. Now I can step back from it and see that that's not the truth at all. I'm stationary. I'm immobile. I'm all pervasive. I'm unchanging, immutable. How did I fall into the misfiance otherwise? That I'm anything other than that Atman inside. So a little bit more later this month at the retreat about the certitude of non-duality, how that comes upon a soul more and more as they ascend this ladder of wisdom steps, see, stages, bhumikas, higher and higher grounds. Let's call them deeper and deeper grounds. And then sees Brahman in all. So let's give a quick gander at that, how to see Brahman or Atman in everything. So we can have some examples of these higher stages. There's not going to be anything hardly to say about the uppermost Jnana Bhumika. It's as if we're saying everything that can be said by talking here about Asam Shakti and Padartha Bhavana. So at least we'll be able to have some good teachings that go as far as possible with words and ideas and thoughts towards describing this seeing Atman in everything. So there you see how it's put in this chart. How to perceive the Atman in all. It's a matter of being ready and making preparation and following through. So it's another very good triputi that we saw in the past chart too, that had to be accompanied with things like enthusiasm. So the quote here is, all beings should hear at the outset that they are the Atman. Then, immediately, they must be taught the means to realize it. For on earth and in heaven, Atman lies hidden, like gold in mountain streams and oil in sesame seeds. Until this realization dawns on the mind, one's firm avowal has to be, quote, I am not Atman until I realize I am Atman. So until this dawns fully into a state of Padartha Bhavana or Turiya, then you have to keep company of Brahman, the teachings, the teacher, until this has a chance to fully mature in you. And that culminates in just this list here, basically. Readiness means you'll have to have the four clarities. Clarities around food, clarities around the mind, and so forth. These are called prasad. It's a very famous word in Indian tradition, prasad, but it's usually used only for anaprasad, or sacred food that we eat, which is very good for our body. But you also have to have pure energy and pure mind and pure thoughts, chitta prasad. And those are more important actually than pure food, because you'll get the desire to eat pure food if you have a pure mind. Otherwise, you have to keep trying to eat pure food in order to get pure mind. It's a lot slower way to move about things. The three dispositions are listed here too. Krishna mentions them in the Gita. The three purities are listed as a part of readiness. And the four fruits of life are brought in. Artha, and then Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. Put Dharma first. And then yogic connections must be made. These, spiritual synapses, if you want to call it that are not a part of the brain, but more a part of your subtle body, sharira, suksha sharira, your subtle body. You start making connections in that from a seated position with a book open. See, consult the scriptures, get enthusiasm, and then listen to the teacher tell you about these things and give you a direct transmission. That's a great readiness, you see. Oh, I've already read the scriptures, then I went to my guru. And then what he said corroborated what was in the scriptures, and that was it. My ignorance was gone, utterly gone. Now, not only did I read the scriptures and believe them, but I heard my teacher corroborate it. That made all the difference. In between was my enthusiasm to accomplish the task. Very beautiful teaching. So this all has to do a lot with yogic connections. And then preparation. I've already talked about the 5 sheaths in advance. So you, like the Upanishad says, come to know that you're the Atman and you just got these 5 sheaths around you. It's one of the simplest ways of putting it. If you want to go study the 24 cosmic principles all the way back to Lord Kapila, good. If you have the time, it'll be very good for you. But Vedanta at a later date came forward and said, let's just put this into 5 sheaths: body, energy, mind, thought, and ego. And know that those are, like layers around the coconut. And in the middle is the kernel. When the coconut's ripe, the kernel rattles around inside when you shake it. If it's not ripe, it's still one with all of these. So what Sri Ramakrishna means is what the ignorance of that you're not the body is still, you think you're the other layers of the coconut. You think you're the body, you think you're the life force, then you start thinking you're the mind, then you think an intellectual starts thinking he's the intellect, egotistic person starts thinking they're the greatest ego, and the Atman goes overlooked in all of that completely. So this is why, that's why I said in the quote up here, so you must first hear at the outset that you are the Atman. Then immediately, that's before they can even doubt it, they must be taught the means to realize it. So this is called readiness and preparation. If your teacher tells you the 5 sheaths and you've already read the Upanishad, as I'm saying, you've got a great advantage there. 5 types of sacrifice should go on. Should be sacrificing to people, which you do selflessly, to your children, to your family, to your monk brothers, and so forth. And you should be sacrificing to the animals that are around you, doing sacrifice to the plants, Bhuta Yaga it's called, taking care of the plant life, insects and so forth, with a nonviolent attitude. This is what they mean in part. And then the gods, if you can, most good people will know, oh, I think I'll just hold animals, insects, my garden and all of that, sacrosanct, and try and nurture it. And then next, I think I'll do the same with my children and my family and so forth. But then usually it's not given to a lot of people, although in religion it is. I think I'll start sending light, to my ancestors. See, I have to sit and think about them. You can't just go to their grave and offer a flower once in a while. They're not the body. They're not there in the graveyard. They've gone inward, So find them inward and do sacrifice to them. Think about them. The whole thing is about thought. Vrittis, vijnanam, consciousness. It's just that certain kinds of thought have been holding you back for so long. And the thought has to be released, filled with light, so that it can penetrate all the way to the ancestors. And then beyond them is the gods and goddesses, Deva Yagya, Deva Devi Yagya. So you should have this deep rapport and devotion and reverence for the gods and goddesses. And then finally, we said already, mankind itself. So this is a preparation you're doing, you see. So far, 5 sheaths and 5 sacrifices. These are quintuplications that are very important in the tradition. Adidaiva Vidya, Well, I already mentioned that. See, you could go back and look at the ancient divine wisdom, Adi, original, Daiva, divine, Vidya, wisdom. And so you look back to the old times and see how the seers thought about everything, how they realized everything through their practices, what methods they used, and then apply them, bring them forward to your day and time, yourself, to your own thinking process. May that illumine, may Brahman illumine our thinking process. Well, not just come along and throw some light at you. You should make yourself ready for this and then prepare for this light. And then when it comes, you'll recognize it. Pratyabhigya, you'll be in divine recognition of it. Thank you. See? And you'll recognize it as not coming from outside, as my motions are seeming to be right now, but all from inside yourself. Those things, those principles that you worshipped and had sacrifice for, you should have been doing them inside. The incense and the plants are inside you first. Then they come out into the form. Brahman's not a form. The essence is not a form. It's a cause. It's beyond a cause. So your children, your grandfathers, they're walking around in bodies, but we already said those are unoriginated. They're never born or they never die. There are principles inside of you that all of a sudden manifested through 5 sheaths. So you have to completely change your look at everything that way. And then as you move inside, you'll see that the gods and goddesses, like Sri Ramakrishna told us and realized, are also inside of you. They're not out there somewhere. In fact, there's nothing out there or up there whatsoever but 5 elements. And you leave the earth, there's precious few of those out there. What happened to air and water kind of thing. So this is what you always school yourself in. Going back to non-duality, certitude of non-duality means that you reached the realization that the non-duality was the truth, the highest truth, the ultimate truth, and there's nothing better or higher than that. There cannot be anything better or higher than that. And that's what makes you one with Brahman, realize. It's not just closeness we're after, it's oneness. So closeness, you'll find it here, in preparations. Get closer and closer to God is getting closer and closer to yourself. Praying to God is praying to yourself, Sri Ramakrishna said, and Ramana Maharshi too. So it leaves everything out of the picture that's not qualified to be Brahman. The unborn, as Gaudapada calls it. This is Ajati. This is the Ajati Vada. This is the path of the unborn. They reach here, and all the games about dualities, varieties, pleasures and pains, life and death is over. Get thee behind me is what Jesus really said, because he knew the immortal soul. He was one with the Father. You put together I and my Father are one with get thee behind me, with birds have nests, foxes have holes. You've got the whole thing right there that India ever taught in Jesus's words, in a very simple language. It just has to be done. So prepare yourself, ready yourself, prepare yourself, and then study. The 3 bodies, the 3 worlds, the 5 akashas. If you read say the Varaha Upanishad, which I was looking at last week, oh, what a soup and nuts that is. It's just like the Atmabodha introduction we like of Niklananda. This Upanishad just starts out, and everything that you've studied for the last 30, 50, 70 years is listed in the early paragraphs. Everything is there. It's like, oh, well, how do I go find what's in the Adidaiva Vidya? Well, look in that Upanishad, there it is. So you have 3 bodies. There are 3 lower worlds that you're occupying with your ancestors, and there are 5 kinds of space in them. This is a consummate package, philosophical package that sets you right with everything, sets you on the right track with everything. Bhranti darshana, get thee behind me. False seeing, false philosophical conclusions, no more. we're beyond that now, you see. So if you want to put it in in a more matter of imagery, then you'll see here Atman reflecting in everything. So I'm Atma Brahma, the self is Brahman, and it reflects through everything and sheds its light in everything. How does it do that? From the primal word Om, in the beginning was the world, was the word, down to the Trinity, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva in this case, down to the avatar who comes out of the Trinity and comes to the three lower worlds in order to help people. Like if they think they're just one body, he's coming and telling you, well, what happened to your other two bodies? How'd you forget that? They think they live in just one space, like the world does today. Your geologists and your scientists and so forth. He'll come back and say, what about the other four kinds of space? How did you forget those? There's a mental space you can go explore too. There's an intellectual space. So the avatar will come out of the Trinity to the three lower worlds and tell you about these things. Remind you, even in a country like America, in Kali Yuga, in modern times, it's happening. So we go look at the person who did it again for us, so recently, reminding us of all this. And he's still doing it through us. See the similarity here? He kind of convinced me, you see, about all of this, along with my Swami. And then the ancestors. See, they too become a part, like with the worship. And then mankind. That's also a kind of sacrifice, right? You do to Nara Yag, it's called, all the way down to lokas, worlds, and the universe itself. It's interesting to put those side by side because most people think that the universe is this physical only. And they can't even figure that one out. They're just in awe of the physical universe. But seers got over the physical universe. They found that it was too limiting. And so they started looking into these other kinds of space. And what they found there were lokas. There's a physical universe, but there's also lokas. That's why it says three worlds here. Or where'd that go to? Three worlds. Because they found out there was a world of the humans, there was a world of the elementals, and there was a world of the ancestors. And then somebody meditating on those found out that there was a world of the devas and devis, the heart chakra. And beyond that, there were worlds they called later chakras, lotuses, that beings by the billions were occupying. Is it hard to believe when there's 7 or 8 billion here now? So all of these things deserve due consideration. I bring this chart up. Let's read the final quotes to try to put a capper on this seeing Brahman in all level of things. I'm sorry. Atman, certitude of non-duality and onward. It says here, it should be known that energy assumes various forms, such as earth, water, light, air, and ether, at the command of the Lord of the Gunas. After setting cosmic cycles in motion and withdrawing itself from there, it mixes the principle of spirit with the principle of matter via the power it invests in the tattvas, using 1, 2, 3, 5, and 8-fold combinations. The primal power of that blessed overseer gives impetus to the fresh creation and thus orders all things. Then it withdraws the gunas, dissolves all forms, and remains aloof in its own essence. That's the great Svetashvatara, a rishi who was not as ancient as a lot of the rishis who wrote other Upanishads, a little bit more current. That's where you see he's into this idea of mixing spirit with matter. How did that happen? Because a lot of the old rishis with pure non-dualists say, matter, what's that got to do with anything? There's only spirit. But some of these beings want to come and try and explain to you how matter and spirit don't mix. but they do have a relationship. So it seems like oil and water mix, but it'll separate in about 45 seconds or less. So in that same way, people are thinking that, well, if they believe in spirit at all, because quite a few of them only think the body, physical universe, as I was just saying, but others are beginning to see there must be a more refined presence or essence inside of me, even if it's out somewhere other than me. That's not non-duality you're talking about. Duality also goes into religion and puts a separation between creature and creator. But there is no separation. They're one and the same. It's what non-duality wants to try and convince you of. So Svetashvatar and the Upanishad that came out of that line of great illumined rishis said so much there that was already in this chart. That's why I chose these two slokas there. And the final one, and here, oh great, it's from Gaudapada's Karika, so we're right in line with what's coming. He says, in Samadhi, the mind is Brahman, with illumination all around, and free of superimpositions. There is this description of Brahman, quote, it is unborn, free of sleep, without dreams, devoid of names and forms, flashing up all at once. It is omniscient. It is like intense concentration without end, but transcendent of conceptualization. It is silent with no words, completely calm, illumined once and for all, unmoving, and free of all fear. And those of you who've heard me teach from the Karika before over the years know that I've often said that that's my favorite description of Brahman of any I've ever heard. In all the Upanishads and all the scriptures, Gaudapada hit the nail right on the head there. And he's talking about the unborn with a capital U, non-origination. That's the king. Non-duality is supreme. So it's very beautiful. Nonetheless, and I'd say until it happens, it's in everything, right? So it's not a transcendent philosophy that leaves everything out. It's all-inclusive non-duality we're talking about, which is very, very well instanced by the avatar Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, who is the most recent on the scene in this Kali Yuga, and also by his great student Swami Vivekananda, and the sweet and subtle presence of Holy Mother. Happy birthday, Holy Mother, today on Mother's Day. Let's move on. We went through it rather quickly, but you can see this chart. I think it's I'm not sure if it's in Footfalls. It might be one of the newer ones, but it's been recorded in this class. So it'd be a very beautiful thing to look at. So I realize we're going back and forth here between Asam Shakti and Padartha Bhavana, but I said earlier that there's really not a lot to see, so I was choosing a few teachings like this to try and give us a deeper idea of what they mean by everything, seeing Brahman in everything, which is here up at Padartha Bhavana. But before that, and it was already included in here that the Lord of the Gunas is doing this. So if you want a personality or a great soul, that would be Sri Krishna. And the Gita talks about the gunas are in me, and I'm the overseer of them. And other beings in all the worlds dance at the behest of the three gunas, like figurines in a circle. They turn around. All the world's beings their lives turn around due to the three gunas. But those beings that can become triguna, tita, tita means to get beyond the three gunas, then that's included at a very high level of Jnana Bhumika, very high level. The gunas will not go away until you would see the cause and effect of creation, preservation, destruction. You'd see through that. Oh no, not another cycle. Where is it coming from? It's not coming from anywhere. It's unoriginated. If you said it has a beginning, middle, and end, then you don't understand non-duality. So Krishna, in that very section of the Gita, says, there's no beginning, middle, and end to anything, Arjuna. He's espousing non-origination right there in that sloka. It doesn't come, it doesn't stay, and it doesn't go. And in no way we say that, right? Come, stay, go. So we must be believers in duality here, in the pigeon wordage. See, but Brahman doesn't come, stay, go. It's unoriginated. So you have to tussle with that one in your mind. From there, you go to it's not born, it's not living, and it's not dying. It's eternal life, if you want to put it that way. Some great souls have seen it and seen that it is that way. Wrapping it up here, really, basically goes beyond even attainment there at the level of Padartha Bhavana. And back at the level of Asam Shakti, realizes the Jivan Mukti state, becomes a Jivan Mukta, a living, liberated being. And so it, again, sort of begins to defy words and thoughts here. But you can see there back at the first teaching of Padartha Bhavana at the 13th, or what we're talking about, the 6th level of Jnana Bhumika now, that this soul begins to identify with consciousness alone, which means that in its preparation stage, before it had learned how to disidentify with everything else. Let's go back to the 12 stages of detachment to learn how it learned in stages how to disidentify with everything else. So that's preparation. These charts that I brought you through today to explain these stages are all about the readiness that you think you're ready to go on this journey. Then you prepare for the journey with certain things, supplies that you want to take on this inner hike, as it were. And then you come to this realization of Brahman being in everything. So in that way, you would identify everything as consciousness, not just identify with consciousness, but you'd then turn around and just identify everything as consciousness. Like Sri Ramakrishna said, I was in the temple, Mother Kali showed me Chaitanya in everything. It was in the utensils for the puja. It was in me. It was in the image of her. And then it was in the door and at the door sill and in the bookshelf. It was in everything. And so he had this very deep experience of being shown how Atman Brahman is in everything. If it's hiding a little bit at times or all the time for most people, you have to strip those levels off the gift. You have to see through the appearances and not believe in the phenomena anymore. Because people see an appearance and a phenomenon and they're just hypnotized by it. They're brought right into it. Senses, objects, sensation. And then phenomena like outer space and so forth. So stay calm and steady. Don't disturb the mind once it arrives at this peaceful place, and then witness everything from that peaceful place. And then abide in the self. Rest in disembodied liberation and enters its final immersion. So let's go through each of those as a list from 12, 13 to 14. Merges in Atman, attains certitude of non-duality, transcends the gunas, and realizes the living, liberated state. Is the 5th of the 7 higher stages. Those are highlights of that stage. Then the 6th, Sapta Jnana Bhumikas, Padartha Bhavana. There, the soul can identify with consciousness alone. sees Brahman in all and goes beyond attainment. Sees Brahman in all is actually a very good way of saying it. Exists in this beautiful hymn. Jo kuchai so tu hai tujhse humne dil ko lagaya. Jo kuchai so tu hai tujhse humne dil ko lagaya. I have understood finally, O Lord, that everything exists in Thee. Every heart is ultimately united in Thee. Nothing exists but Thee. O beloved, your grace has returned me to my eternal abode, and your love has permeated my heart. Indeed, is there a heart which exists that is devoid of thy love, when nothing exists but Thee? God and goddess, man and woman, Hindu, Muslim, Christian, all are brought into existence by thy own inscrutable will. What are these beings without you? They all exist in Thee. Churches, temple, Kaaba, all places of worship. You fashion them and cause all beings to bow down there. You have become the worshipper, the act of worship, and the place of worship. Nothing exists but Thee. From the life heavens, throughout the boundless universe, and even into the dark nether regions, wherever our souls journey, we find only Thee, for nothing exists but Thee. Matchless is Thy presence, O Lord. I have found nothing which compares to it. Contemplating it, this humble singer, Jafar, has become illumined, and this single truth has dawned upon his understanding, that nothing exists but Thee. A very fitting conclusion then to end musically with this beautiful hymn is Ghazal by Jafar, and kind of leaving this Turiya stage, seventh stage of higher wisdom, unsullied, as it were, by words, undescribed. But that's where one abides in the self. The beautiful conclusion in the Vedanta is that I am Atman, all abiding. It's a beautiful conclusion and a phrase that we use. I am Atman, all abiding. And rests in disembodied liberation. That's called Videha Mukti. That is, you could be a Jivan Mukta, as was attained earlier, right? But realizes Jivan Mukti. But then the possibility to become fully disembodied and one with Brahman would come to that semblance of an individual soul that's left. And of course that semblance will be then dissolved completely when it enters into immersion. So this has been our 4-week class, I think, series on the Ajnana Bhumikas and the Jnana Bhumikas. And that makes it a series that we can look back on. This has been recorded. And embolden our soul, to have more and more concourse with this beautiful Vedantic teachings, the Dharma. So we will realize that we are spirit, and that matter comes out of us. We don't come out of matter. Mother's Day, sing to our Holy Mother. Devim prasanam pranatarti hantrim yogendra pujam jugadharma patram tam sharadam bhakti vigyana datrim daya swarupam pranamami nityam. O Sharda, propitious goddess, killer of misery and souls resigned, sustainer of religion in every age, by saints and sages worshipped, O Mother kind. Give us love and wisdom, Thou. O grace incarnate, to Thee we bow. Jananim Sharadam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Pado Padme Toye Shritva Pranamami Mahur Mahur Pranamami Mahur Mahur. O Ramakrishna, teacher of all, O Sharda, goddess divine, in bosom holding those lotus feet, salutations to both, ever be of mine. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat.